West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name's Kevin. This is the morning after our winter solstice. Apologies to everyone who showed up yesterday or stayed up late in the UK or tried to tune in on Zoom. I'm afraid yesterday's longest night service was a bit of a shit show, if you'll pardon the language. Scott will will provide more of an update on what happened last night on our longest night from the perspective of an eye and nose witness. I'd like to stress that last night's service is postponed. It's not canceled. We are hoping to resume and find a date coming up after Christmas and New Year's is over with, sometime in earlier mid-January, to try to do this service because it's an important one for West Hill. It's one of West Hill's signature events. It is postponed. It is not canceled. I'm not sure if you got all of that. So that's good because it is one of West Hill's signature events that everybody looks forward to. So without any further ado, we shall proceed. Everyone is on Zoom this morning, as you may have heard if you tuned in right at the top, because our building is closed to anyone right now until things get cleaned up there. There's a bit of an issue there that, as I say, Scott will elaborate on later. West Hill is located in Treaty 20 and in the area of the Williams Treaties of 1923. They are the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and were previously occupied by the Seneca and Wendat First Nations. Many of you may not know that the two-row banner that is displayed in our meeting hall, you'll see it usually on the Zoom. It's got the two purple sides saying honor the treaties. Was purposely designed and chosen by our congregation because it is based on the two-row Wampum Treaty, which is a mutual treaty agreement made in 1613 between representatives of the five nations of the Haudenosaunee and of the Iroquois, and representatives of the Dutch government in what is now upstate New York. It is one of the oldest treaty relationships between the Oconee, which is the original people of Turtle Island, North America, and of European immigrants. The treaty acknowledges the agreement that the two nations will live side by side in a relationship of peace, friendship, respect, and non-interference for as long as the water flows downhill, the grass grows green, and the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Next on the agenda is announcements, and I would like to remind everyone that the Crafty Ladies is just suspended for the next couple of weeks and will resume. There you go. It'll resume on January 7th. The Thursday morning coffee gathering on Zoom at 10 o'clock will take place. And so anyone is welcome to join in on that for warm conversation, and best wishes to everyone for coming up to the new year. Also, to remind everyone, you can check your e-blast for upcoming dates for colloquies in January, February, and March, and you can let us know whether you're interested in a 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 7:30 time. There's two for each of those dates, as usual. And I guess the only other announcement, a couple of them, is that anyone interested in showing off your singing talent is welcome and invited to contact Babette and let her know, and that she and Scott would be glad to work with you to show off your singing skills at West Hill if you would like to present a song or help along with that aspect of our service some Sunday. Also, just a last reminder, as Dan has done in the last few weeks, it's the time of the season, it's the end of the year when people sort of look at their charitable givings and say, oh, right, I better start, or I better make sure I've got all my charitable givings done for the year so I can claim them in the 2024 tax season. And a reminder that West Hill is one of those destinations, hopefully, for your charitable dollars. It is easy. You can use the QR code that you see in the e-blast each week, or send in a check or e-transfer to West Hill at any time. And that is it for me for the announcements. And I would just ask if anybody else has any announcements before I get Scott to give us an update on what happened exactly yesterday. Is there anybody that has any other announcements? If not, then Scott, if you wouldn't mind giving us a, as I say, an eye and nose witness account of what happened yesterday.
Good morning. My sound okay in my basement here? Y'all hearing me? It was deeply disappointing to have to pull such an important special service as the longest night. So I first of all assure you that it was absolutely necessary. But I wanted to comment on the folks that were there in the building, and you will already know this, but Aidan was there with the full tech team, three student tech assistants, and had already set up the whole tech thing. Annie was setting up the candles. Piano was in place. We came to run over the service, but this odor was overwhelming and just seemed to grow and grow and grow. So that when Barb came, I think she should, don't mind me telling people that she had a headache within 10 minutes. But we first thought the first flag was, is this a gas leak? Because it had that strong rotten egg smell. And Aidan was the one that immediately thought, gas leak, lighting 1,000 candles in a building would be terribly. So Aidan phoned 311. They sent a fire truck, which immediately determined it wasn't gas, which was a great relief, but found an enormous sewage backup problem from the basement that was possibly a different kind of unwelcome news. That's what we'd been breathing for the past while. But everybody pulled together beautifully, and you know they would, to get the notice out as fast as we could to people. I've made some phone calls to folks that were driving in to take part, or text or whatever. And fortunately, some people weren't going to be driving a long way, so they didn't affect them. But if you got missed, we tried everything we could to notify. I stayed till 6:15 to people that came, and a few people did come, and they took it graciously and beautifully. And that's really what I'm saying, that when something like this happens, the folks, every one of them deserves the accolades of handling a disaster very well. No one was hurt, nothing except our aesthetic sense. And I put a note on the door that says the service is online only. So we did everything we could. If you find out somebody didn't get the message somehow or other and is having difficulty with it, please let us know so we can contact them personally. That's just I think if we could do that, that would be helpful. So a thank you to everyone that pitched in and helped. Thank you for everyone who came and had to just turn around and go home again. Thank you for everyone that cared about what was happening and was cared about. The first thing was everyone all right. So it was a very West Hill moment, maybe unexpected and unwanted, but it was carried out in a West Hill way. Just wanted to say that to everyone. So thank you.
Alan has chosen 2 readings for us today, 2 brief ones. And as usual, at the end, I will say, offered as wisdom for the journey, and you're welcome to say, may we walk in its light. The first reading is by Mike Sandel, and he summarizes some economists' beliefs, not his own, but he summarizes them in his publication, What Money Can't Buy, The Moral Limits of Markets. He says, from the standpoint of market reasoning, it is almost always better to give cash rather than a gift. If you assume that people generally know their own preferences best, and that the point of giving a gift is to make your friend or loved one happy, well, then it's hard to beat a monetary payment. If your friend or lover can, that way your friend or lover can either spend the cash on the item that you would have bought, or more likely, on something that brings them even greater pleasure. The second reading is from To Know the Dark by Wendell Berry. To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go without sight, and find that the dark too blooms and sings and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. Offered as wisdom for the journey.
May we
walk in its light.
Andrew Welch is returning to West Hill again. We are glad to have him back as our guest speaker. Andrew has spoken here several times, and one of them, he took our vision works and drilled down and spoke directly to many of the values itemized in there. And it was a proud day for all West Hill congregants to have that reinforced. And we surely do thank you, Andrew, for that. And I'm sure the people that have worked on vision works over the years, because it is something that has evolved from its beginning and has been redrafted many times. I'm sure all of those people who tuned in also felt a real sense of pride. So I thank you for that, Andrew. Andrew is always talking about values, and I would just mention that his first book, The Value Crisis, was described by Alternatives Journal as dizzyingly well-researched, and a great reference on and in and out on the in and outs of economics, politics, finance, and the human condition. The sequel, Our Second Chance, was published in February 2022. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Welch back to West Hill. And Andrew, I sure appreciate you doing this on Zoom. I know your preference is to do it live on stage with your dynamic style of speaking, but thank you for being here on Zoom with us today. Andrew.
Marley was dead to begin with. Now, if you ask me, this is not a Christmas story. Marley was dead. This is a solstice story. And maybe I can fill in some of that missing solstice feeling when we lost the longest night last night and had to have it shifted to a slightly shorter night. This is a solstice story because it is part of a very long-standing solstice tradition. It's a Victorian ghost story, and the Victorians not only loved ghost stories, but especially loved them at this time of year, because it was a tradition going back thousands of years for various cultures to be talking about that kind of thing, spirits and ancestors coming back from the past and sharing their wisdom with those in the present. So all around them at the solstice time was death, or what looked like death. And so it was a celebration and an exploration of winter and mortality. So this became Christmas, of course, because the various churches were very good at picking up on all the natural occasions and making them their own big events. Christmas obviously being one of them. All Saints' Day was another, around Halloween. That came from the Celtic Samhain celebration. Easter is all based on, the first full moon post spring equinox, etc. So something about solstice, though, which is really important to me and my work, and hopefully will have some resonance in vision works and so on. Solstice is not a transition. It is a peak, right? It's that peak longest night. It's where the sun hits that sharpest angle before the earth moves back for warmth. And so it's very much a time of reflection on what is past and what is to come, not as a transition, as I say, but as a peak. So back to A Christmas Carol, which I swear is a solstice story. So how much of society does Ebeneezer Scrooge represent? I think it's increasing, but I think it was originally written to represent a whole lot. Not necessarily the number of people, but that side of people. Where does Ebeneezer Scrooge come from? How do we get an Ebeneezer Scrooge? Well, he has a past, and Charles Dickens was very careful to share that past so we could understand a little bit of that. They went in, the ghost of Christmas past, and Scrooge, across the hall, to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them, and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by the lines of plain deal benches and desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a bench and wept to see his poor, forgotten self as he had used to be. So when we go through Scrooge's past, we find that he has been summoned home, a joyous moment. He was apprenticed to Fezziwig and has a grand old time partying. He unfortunately suffers a romance that's just ending, but showed so much potential. He sees a family that might have been, that his family might have been. He explores joy and ambition and love. He has all these past very human values. And then the chill begins, and we begin to see a glimpse of the path he has given up and the path he is now taking. And this is not just the path that Scrooge is taking, it's the path that society is now taking. There are as many solstice stories as there are cultures. It's a truly a global phenomenon, so everybody had to address it, but some more than others, because, and I'll tell you, this is what I figured to be the first solstice story. At one point, when our planet was formed, long before there was people walking around and history to be recorded, there were these dust particles and gases that were all swirling around and slowly coalesced and developed a gravity, and they were spinning. But they were spinning perpendicular to the sun. And so when the planet began to solidify into a mass, every part of the planet had the same weather, climate, I suppose, year-round, essentially. They were all what we would consider March or September. They were all the equinox, because they were all having equal angle to the sun at all times. Every part of the planet from top to bottom was different, but it never changed in that area. And then along came this planetary body, so the theory goes, and slammed into the Earth and knocked it to 23.5 degrees. And that's really important, because when the planet took that tilt and started spinning on an angle, that's what gave us our seasons. That's what science says created seasons. And seasons are huge. They essentially define cycles and polarities, which I often talk about with West Hill. And the winter solstice for the northern hemisphere became the most important simply because 50% of our landmass is above the Tropic of Cancer. So there's more people there, more people experiencing the winter solstice. The tropics were about 40%. They didn't experience the seasons the same way we do. And of course, the 10% at the bottom has the opposite seasons. But this, if you think about it, nature is a web of interconnected animals and life habitats happening all around us. But seasons coordinate that. They provide a metronome, a heartbeat, a breath of the planet on an annual scale, which is phenomenally important to life. And it's also a way of saying that natural life does not have constant growth. Ooh, there's something to file away. So, moves us on to the ghost of Christmas present. And the Ghost of Christmas Present takes Scrooge first through all the trade that's happening at Christmas and all these things that are part of the commerce of Christmas. And then he takes Scrooge to Cratchit's house, where Scrooge has an opportunity to see how the other side lives a bit, how it's not the same affluence that he has. And it continues on. We don't often hear about this in the adaptations of A Christmas Carol, but The Ghost of Christmas Past takes Scrooge to a miner's hut where they're pulling resources out of the ground and trying to scrape a means of living through that way, and how they celebrate Christmas. And then they go flying out to a ship at sea in the middle of a Christmas storm and see how they deal with Christmas. And then he takes Scrooge into his nephew's house, where sort of the middle class are celebrating Christmas in a way that expresses joy and abundance in those sort of non-material sense, but a little bit of material support, I guess. The nephew's in middle-class home. And then they go straight to prisons, and they see how Christmas takes place in prisons and workhouses. And so Scrooge is seeing not just how the poor live at Christmas, but also how he could live if he chose to. And essentially what it's not too late for him to do. From the foldings of its robe, the Ghost of Christmas Present brought 2 children. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints. A stale and shriveled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both, but most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. So the message from the giant Christmas present is that ignorance is doom. We have lessons to learn. How do we learn them? Well, think about it. The present of Charles Dickens was the Industrial Revolution, really. And he didn't address that directly much in A Christmas Carol. No, what he talks about is an emphasis on the values and the inequity that he was seeing growing all around him. And I think this is increasingly the importance of the story. It's what makes it timeless and even more timely, because what he talked about is something that perhaps he had a vision was going to expand and become even more and more a thing to be addressed. Not long ago, a few years ago, maybe about 8 or 10 years ago now, oh no, actually it was more than that, it was maybe 14 years ago, I made an interesting discovery when I was doing my writing. I read a book by Margaret Atwood called Payback. And it was a written version of the Massey lectures that she was giving for CBC. And one of her chapters, one of her lectures, was an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And it was genius. She wrote about the ghosts of Earth Day, past, present, and future. And I guess that was her way of saying, look, if you missed the message in A Christmas Carol, I'm going to spell it out for you. And I had a wonderful opportunity to actually, I'd been doing Dickens readings for a number of years at the time, and I thought, I'm going to do Earth Day readings of this chapter. And so we did that for a few years in different places. Look it up. It's a fabulous, not too long book called Payback by Margaret Atwood. But it addresses one of the aspects of Christmas, because Christmas talks about, well, among other things, business. What does Marley say about it? He says, business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. Oh, the dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. Hear me, my time is nearly gone. Isn't it interesting that business has adopted Christmas as its salvation? This is such a time for business. As a matter of fact, I think the scariest thing in some respects about A Christmas Carol, the one miracle that Dickens introduced, is right at the end. It's not about the ghosts. It's not any of the spiritual stuff. It's that the only actual purchase made that I recall in A Christmas Carol is from the poulterer who lives just down the street on Christmas Day. Isn't it interesting that the poulterer is open on Christmas Day? So anyway, just a little side note. We often talk about the reason for the season. And I truly believe that there is a reason for the season. The season, winter, right? 4 seasons. And the reason for the season is very much connected to what I often talk about in terms of the cycles that the natural world goes through, and how if it was all the same season constantly as it was before that 23.5-degree angle got knocked in there, you wouldn't have plants having a time to fall back and regenerate and go in different directions, and other plants taking a step forward. It would be just this constant growth. So yes, the reason for the season is indeed about human values. No, it's not about profit centers. But I don't think, for me, it's about the birth of a dogma that gets a nod 1 day out of 7, if that, either. It's about our connection to the breathing and the heartbeat of a planet. And the key message from A Christmas Carol is not just the challenges that are facing us and facing Dickens at the time of the Industrial Revolution and all these transformations taking place in what we valued, but it's a very optimistic message. It's a message that says we can identify those polarities, those extremes of the coldest, longest night, the warmest, longest night in the summer, and emphasizes, above all else, our choice. This is not something which is being imposed on us by the natural world. This is just a cycle that happens, and our choice is how we react to that. And this is something which is specifically brought to mind when Ebeneezer turns to the ever-silent ghost of Christmas future and says, "Are these the shadows of things that will be? Or are they the shadows of things that may be only? Oh, men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, but if the courses be departed from, well, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me now. We have a choice. darkness is not bad. Remember that Wendell Berry poem right off the top? Darkness, if you go into darkness with the light, you will only know the light. But go dark, and you will know the dark. Darkness is scary because it signifies the unknown. But I think in some respects, it also signifies the unknowable. And what Wendell Berry was partly saying to me is that what we're dealing with in the world around us, in every interaction we have with society and with fellow human beings, and most importantly with the complex web that is the nature around us, is that this complexity is unknowable. We can never fully grasp and understand it. And if we walk into that darkness without a light, attempting to overcome the complexity, instead embrace the complexity, things will work out all right. There are things that have dark feet and have dark wings and continue to celebrate and sing their songs in the darkness. And so we just travel that cycle. And this is what, to me, the solstice is most importantly about. It's, again, the solstice is a peak. It is a time of going over that hill more than an abrupt transition. And of course, as I say repeatedly at West Hill on my broken record perspectives, what I think is most important is that we learn the concept of sufficiency, and that we accept that things will move in cycles and nothing goes in a straight line. And this is what Scrooge eventually learns, is that there is that concept of sufficiency where heading off in one path only, well, the ghost of Christmas Future shows him where you end up with that. And so that ghost of Christmas Future is often portrayed as doom and gloom, almost as the Grim Reaper, as death. Well, there's death associated with winter, but not so much as might be portrayed by the Grim Reaper. This is not trees dying. The leaves don't die and fall off a tree. The tree cuts them off. The tree pulls back the things that it needs out of the leaves, the valuable chemicals, and then it snips them off and lets them go so that the cycle can continue and it can have fresh leaves and fresh growth and spread out in different ways in the spring. And so the ghost of Christmas Future merely draws our attention to that concept of cycles and mortality, to our own mortality, being not all about us, but about the part we play and the legacy that we can leave. And so, to sort of close with Charles Dickens' words again, best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. And Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, and he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins and have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. May that truly be said of us, and all of us. Thanks for listening.
Andrew, we thank you. Let me reflect back to you what you brought us, and I thank you personally because of what we missed last night having. So you brought us the solstice. You brought us darkness and light, the universe, the connections. You brought us Charles Dickens, for which I was very grateful. I don't know if some of you were doing what I was doing, was saying it along with you, because we know those words so well. And I must particularly say you're a darn good Marley. Oh my goodness. I was scared listening to you. It was quick. And then the boy, and that's that boy that's ignorance. The girl is want and the boy is ignorance. That is such a powerful statement. Beware, but most of all, beware of not knowing, not wanting to know, not facing what's true. That's such a powerful message there. Thank you for bringing us Margaret Atwood. And for those of you that don't know, she's a well-known Canadian author that many of us took in school or have enjoyed ever since. Thank you for mentioning past, present, and future. And works on, David White has a book called Consolations. I couldn't find it right now, but he talks about maturity being one's ability to live in reference to the past, the present, and the future as a continuum. And then thank you for mentioning the seasons and the cycles, and for emphasizing our choice within those cycles, the choice. And I love Dickens' statement, and thank you for bringing it. The good old world. I kind of like that. The good old world. I wonder if there's anyone that wants to make a comment or a question. Just adding your appreciation of a particular part of Andrew. I'm so glad you were the one John invited to be part of this seasonal would be a high church service in other churches, but it was our seasonal focus here. Anyone want to comment or a question? I'll try and watch the whole screen. Anne?
I just enjoyed every minute of it, Andrew. You're an incredibly knowledgeable and skilled teacher and storyteller. And now we know you're a skilled performer as well. And I think I know we appreciate you today, and particularly today. So thank you very much. And I just have one question. Yes. When did you realize that you look like Marley? Because you nailed him.
My Marley this morning was a little different because when I'm doing all of the voices, I really struggle to find more differentiation, and Marley digs back to my Scottish roots. So normally Marley is a Scot, so having been born in Scotland, I can get away with that. Yeah, there you are, John. Hello. Marley is usually a Scottish one. I don't know. I guess my face ends up looking a bit like a Marley, doesn't it? With the jaw
it did. Yes, I'm sorry to say it was very,
no
very
question. Thank you.
For how many was Dickens a part of your Christmas growing up? You're just we had an old record of Lionel, somebody reading it. My parents would read us the whole story, and then of course welcome you find them online. There's the musical Scrooge, which I love. There's a American Christmas Carol by Fonzie himself, doing a wonderful job of that. And then there's various ones, but if you're with me, my very all-time favorite has to be Alistair Sims doing that. And when they colorized it, I wouldn't watch it. Has to be black and white. Has to be black and white. So again, anyone else just want to comment on that or appreciation of we all did. It was marvelous. I'm just going to look at another screen here.
Mike's got his hand up.
Mike, go ahead.
What a masterful job you did, Andrew. For the past 2 years, I've been asked to be one of the guest readers at a Dickens Christmas that a local Lutheran church does. And they involve their bishop and reverend, and the regional chair from our region was there. And I've had different parts to read, but I've not seen or heard them perform like a masterful job you had done. But many of the lines you were saying, I was kind of going right along with them.
Yeah, that's right.
Marley was dead.
And might I add, you made me shiver.
Well, there-
I'll share a little anecdote actually, which never occurred to me until now, because I grew up with my father reading A Christmas Carol, and I even now I find sometimes church programs from the Unitarian Church where he would be doing readings and so on in his inside the book. But where it really took off for me, and actually where my writing took off, was entirely coincidental. I was asked, I happened to be the artistic director one year of a local community theater, and on that basis alone, I was asked to do a Christmas reading as one of the CBC readings, where a CBC guest star is brought in to do the fourth stave. And so I was brought in to do the third stave, and the guest star was Paul Kennedy of Ideas. And so when I did my reading, apparently Paul was kind of blown away by this. He doesn't normally get to, be competing with another performer. And so we had a long chat afterwards and developed a bit of a friendship. And he would invite me to conferences that were all about ecological economics. So that was my shot in the arm. I think that was probably what pushed me over the edge to finish a book and move forward. So it's an amazing thing how the world just kind of clicks together, a wheel over there and happens to grab a tooth over there, and away you go.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.